Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show, here with you every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Well, I say that, but we've been a bit hit and miss over the last couple of weeks. I've been rushing around doing my kind of, well, I'm sure can't really call it a day job, but my side hustle of making what are they called? Wooden toy stables, and I've gone blank again. Yes, wooden toy stables and farm buildings is what I kind of do on the side, folks, and so that is what I have been up to. I'll throw a link in the live chat so you guys have a look if you want to have a look at what I do on that side of things. So anyway, what are we up to this weekend or this week? Well, it's we're easing back into things, aren't we? As I say, I've been a bit in and out of it recently, so I'm easing myself back in, but also we're easing into the men's November window games as well. I will have a chat about the All Blacks, Japan versus the All Blacks, and also Scotland versus the Wallabies. We'll also kind of news points as well, a whole bunch of injuries and that kind of stuff going on. As Simon points out in the live chat, there's also Rugby World Cup qualifying as well for the what used to be called the repechage, but whatever it's called nowadays. But for the final place to go to the Rugby World Cup. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that, remind you who the teams are that are involved in that and who might take that place. The reviewer reckons Portugal might take the spot, which is an interesting shout. But as I say, we'll have a quick chat about those teams that are involved in that as well. Hopefully, I will be joined by a couple of guests this evening, and you won't just be my monotonous voice throughout it all, because I'll be honest with you, I've not seen much, or haven't seen any of the Women's Rugby World Cup, but obviously we will have to have a quick chat about those games as well that happened on the weekend. So so let's just get into the games, I guess, to start off with. Look, Japan versus the All Blacks, definitely an enjoyable game. I enjoyed watching that one on Saturday. It must have been not watched a lot of rugby recently, so it was nice to get back in to that. I've got a funny feeling with games coming up over the next, this coming weekend, with games that I would like to catch being played at funny times like 2 o'clock in the morning. That there'll be games that I would like to watch this coming weekend. So yes, up in the middle of the night to watch some of those games. I think coming up. But as I say, I enjoyed it. This one, look, Japan were always in this one. Got within 4 points, but at the end of the day, did we ever feel like Japan was actually going to win it? I don't really think so. Look, I mean, the All Blacks led the whole way through this game. Once Brady Retallick scored that opening try on, 5 minutes or so. Sorry, 11 minutes in that he scored his try, and the All Blacks led from there on. Sure, with just 2 minutes to go, Japan were within 4 points and could have snuck it and won the game. Don't get me wrong, but it never really felt like they were really going to do so. There was obviously the red card to Brody Retallick in there, and since there is also a yellow card in the Scotland versus the Wallabies game, perhaps we'll talk about clear-outs at rucks in a second. Later on, we'll talk about both of those together in that one. Looking at the stats, look, the All Blacks, 61% possession, 54%, 56% territory, only giving up 6 penalties compared to the 13 by Japan. To have only won this game by 7 points, you've got to say they should have done better. So yes, the All Blacks not firing on all cylinders by any stretch of the imagination on this one. Only 78% tackle rate by the All Blacks, not very good. Let's be honest, that is a whole bunch of missed tackles, 28 there, 32 by the Japanese, who had to make more tackles, so a better percentage, but missed more tackles. So lots of, quite a lot of, so that's why I guess part of what makes this a fun game. 19 offloads by the All Blacks, 10 by Japan. So free-flowing, enjoyable game to watch. Not something that we'll talk about, not something that would be the same for the following game later. But So yeah, interesting. So yeah, free flowing game. I enjoyed it. I had fun. Look, this is not a first choice lineup by the All Blacks, and this is after Japan has already had 3 games, or at least the sort of Japan 15 has had 3 games against Australia A. So they've had warm-ups coming. This one relatively hot. The All Blacks having had a few weeks off, and obviously missing players as well. In this one, look, I mean, we had players like RTS and Braden Ennell in the centres, clearly not a first choice centre combination there. Finley Christie getting a start, doing well, but again, not a first choice player there in that one either. So lots of players in this one who were not, as I say, first choice All Blacks. Not on the right, so yeah, so it's 40% first choice All Blacks in this one. So, but a cracking game by Japan to keep that side to 4 points, to within 4 points during the whole of this. This was clearly one of the games that they really had targeted for this November, and you could see that with how they played. A lot of plaudits for Hemino. Obviously scored a try, but he also, to me, was pretty soft on one of the tackles, which allowed on the All Blacks tries. So, as I say, a lot of plaudits for him in this one. But I think some rose-tinted glasses on some of that stuff. Well, that's my opinion. What do you think, Mr. Stephen Harris? Oh no, Stephen Harris's thing isn't plugged in properly, because I'm getting crackling and no sound from him. Yep, lots of crackling and no sound from Stephen. So he might have to give up on the headphones. And no, we've still got no sound. So Steve, you're going to have to work on your technical issues and log in perhaps 10 minutes beforehand so we can do technical checks before a show, because of professionals that we are. So look, I mean, obviously, also Stephen Fairfield had a decent game. Got some game time at the back there as well. What the hell was Foster saying that Albrecht Alex hit was innocuous? Yes. What's what a load of rubbish with that one. Simon says, yeah, Steve could learn sign language, but I would learn sign language too, and it wouldn't be very good for our podcast listeners, would it, Steve?
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Well, there you go. Got things up and running. Do apologise, folks. Always a pleasure to be back on the show after a couple of weeks off.
So what's been your we'll get back to the game in a moment, folks. What was your rugby league weekend like, Stephen? Are you still commentating on the Armed Forces Rugby World Cup, or is that over now?
No, the Defence Forces final was played last Tuesday, and that was between New Zealand and France, and it was a very, very tight battle, a little bit like the 2011 World Cup. There was only 1 point in it, but on this occasion, it was the French that came away with the victory by 9 points to 8. Very, very tight game it was. Unfortunately for the New Zealand team, who'd been so impressive through the tournament, just basically got roped into playing the French style of game, and a penalty with about 2 minutes to go from the French gave them what I've got to say was a well-deserved victory. They were very, very good up front, and maybe a bit of an insight to what we might see coming up this weekend in the Women's Rugby World Cup semi-final.
Yeah, we'll get back to that one. We'll come back to that with the Women's Rugby World Cup later. I was at the Waikato AMP show this weekend, folks. So watched the All Blacks game in a hotel room. Didn't make enough sales, so go back to that first comment I've got in the live chat and click on that and go buy some toy stables for Christmas for your kids. That's what's over on choice.co.nz/store/Kia-play. There we go. That's my little sales pitch for you. Advertising brought to you by Kia Play on that one. So your thoughts on the All Blacks game then, between Japan and obviously and the All Blacks. Your kind of hot takes. Do you enjoy the game?
Yeah, let me first say, I was glad it was a contest, and it also gives you a little bit of an insight to how far Japanese rugby has come along, and obviously they were very prepped for this match. Admittedly, they didn't have a lot of preparation, a little bit like the All Blacks did. But listen, I was mightily impressed, especially with the way that they stayed in the fight, and boy, right at the end there, they could have won it with a little bit of luck.
Yeah, look, it's one of those ones. I think I said, yeah, the All Blacks, whilst it was a contest and Japan were in it, you never felt like they were going to win it. They were just kind of just held at bay throughout it on that one. So, but go on. Let's well, I'll say we'll come back to the Brodie Retallick red card after we had a quick chat about Scotland versus the Wallabies. I've seen highlights of this one, Steve, the extended highlights. Have you seen? Did you watch this whole game?
Of the Scotland Australia game?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I actually saw most of the game. I thought, Scotland played very, very well. Like, listen, the conditions weren't the best, but on saying that, I thought the Scottish put a lot of pressure on Australia. I think Australia probably just a little bit guilty of trying to play too much rugby in those conditions, just making mistakes. And listen, it's probably not often the Scots will score two tries to one and still lose a game, but that's exactly what happened. But I must admit, both their tries were pretty well taken. There was a very good their first try, very good sort of ball movement and well finished off. And of course, Blair Kinghorn, who was the hero for Scotland right up until probably that final kick. Paul taking a really good opportunity and showing a bit of pace, a good bit of toe to outflank the Australian defence after they turned the ball over, and that was from an attacking move as well.
Yeah, okay, that was Foley dropping that ball and then Kinghorn kicking it through and going on to score. So two players who I think have taken or have been a key focus of this game. I'll be honest, I know that you're worried for the All Blacks when they for the rest of this tour and obviously playing Scotland. To me, I didn't see much from this game that would really worry many teams from either side. To be honest, one of the criticisms from this of Foley was he didn't do much apart from kick his goals, and yet the difference between his two teams is that he kicked his goals and Kinghorn didn't missed two of his. And so it's funny how Foley gets criticised for for only kicking goals, whereas the criticism for Scotland is you've got to pick a goal kicker. So it's funny, isn't it, that how these players in some cases can't win, Stephen.
Oh, very much so. And listen, I think both teams, from what I believe, the Scottish had a few players missing, and we know that the Australians have got a few players missing at the moment. So maybe the quality probably wasn't where it should be. But listen, I was quite pleased for the Australians that they got their tour off on the right note. And boy, they needed a good start given where they're heading to this weekend. Scotland. Yeah, I probably tend to agree a little bit. They were. I'm just trying to find a good word for it. Listen, they were pretty solid, and they were, and they played with a lot of heart. But yeah, you're probably dead right. I don't know if there's a lot to trouble the All Blacks there. But listen, they've got a game under their belt now, so they should be better come next weekend. It'll be interesting to see though if Gregor Townsend does make some changes and does bring the likes of a Finn Russell back into that important pivotal position.
Yeah, Finn Russell's not even in the squad this year. He's decided that he cannot get on with him for whatever reason. So he's clearly skillful enough, but it's just he just can't manage him within the squad properly, and so that's why it's all falling apart there.
I was going to say, I see Stuart Hogg was running around for his club.
So this is outside the international window. So for players like Hogg and Finn Russell wouldn't have been available for this game anyway, playing in England and France respectively. So they weren't available for this game. But even so, Finn Russell will not be taking part in the whole November window, barring a big turnaround. But Hogg will be. I just thought Scotland was their decision making was pretty poor. Look, they had the opportunity straight in front of the posts to score to take 3 points, didn't, and then got held up over the line. Their forwards just bashed away. There was opportunities on the blind side where they had 4-on-2 against, including Tate McDermott being one of those defenders. Now, nothing against Tate McDermott as a player. I think he's a wonderful player, but he's a scrum half, and he's someone you can run over. So to my mind, some pretty poor game management by Scotland early on. And when this game comes down to a 1 point win, that poor game management, or decision making, add in you're missing 2 kicks, and you can either look at this glass half full, a couple of decisions the other way, a couple of kicks, and this is a comfortable win for Scotland, or you're half empty, as in, boy oh boy, this is a game you let slip, and you shouldn't be messing around at this level like that. You should be having to sort out decision making like and those sort of things at this level when you've got Ali Price, who is a British and Irish Lions number 9 in there, who should be, was he not being communicated to properly to let him know where the play was, or what was it? But anyway, so yeah, I think there's 2 ways of looking at Scotland from this. From Australia, as you say, injuries, but then again, every team has to deal with that. And look, they got over the line, and I think as they just tick the box, we've got the win, move on. We can play better rugby another time, I think, just from them. But yellow card in this one for a clear out. So apparently it was a yellow card, not a red card, because he hit him with his bicep first rather than his shoulder, which is the first time I've heard that in any ruling from anywhere by Luke Pearce. So, mate, I'm afraid, sorry, but I don't know where you dragged that one up from, because I don't think it makes it any less. It's lesser force if it's with the bicep. Well, maybe slightly, but I don't think you can. I don't think it was significantly less force because of that. So I can't see how he managed to downgrade it from red to yellow.
I was about to say, Paul, I might even put a little bit of a monologue of both the incidents up on our website, and boy, you can tell us, if you're tuning in, you can tell us what you actually thought, because to me, I thought they were both reds every day of the week, twice on Sunday, while Brodie's clean out probably, well, there was more shoulder to head. I've got to say that the Scottish replacement player, Young, I think his name was, came from a long way back. He certainly was coming off the long run when he came in and cleaned McDermott out. And to be honest, I thought there was just a little bit of luck that could have been way more serious.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gregor Townsend saying that, look, it's a race to be in there first because we're allowing the jackal, and therefore players aren't going to slow down. Well, if you're not going to slow down, you're going to get sent off. So you need to understand that if you're not there first, you've lost, and you've got to be more careful getting in. Simple as that.
Yep. I was also about to say, Paul, at no stage when we were growing up as kids, that coming through the grains, we were ever told to fly in like a Scud missile, whether it be to tackles or in fact, even if you were the ball carrier, it was about bracing yourself, protecting yourself, and the same rules apply now.
Well, yes and no. The same rules or the same laws are there in place. They're just not applied, and that's kind of the difference here. People will say, "Oh, we need a law change to stop this and stop all the head contacts." We don't need a law change. We need 2 laws to be properly enforced. 1, you have to keep your feet at the ruck. Players don't. 2, you're not allowed to have your shoulders below your hips at the ruck. So that would first off make it much harder to jackal. So you'd have to get your hips much lower, and we wouldn't have so much of a pile of bodies. We'd have more of an actual ruck if players stayed on their feet. So if we enforce those 2 things, now it would require an entirely different style of play from a lot of players. Let's be honest. So those to me, if you enforce those 2 things, it would change the ruck entirely. It's not like we haven't had players like I want to say Dean Ryan, but it's not. I want to talk about the Fijian Sevens coach who won the Rugby World Cup with them in Rio. Is it Dean Ryan? I think it is. Anyway, we've had him talking about it, and plenty of other people talking about how the ruck is just a mess for years, and nothing that they actually do is really it's all tinkering rather than actually trying to sort it out properly in one fell swoop. So I don't say that that's how World Rugby likes to do it. It likes to slowly change things rather than have tries to get play to evolve rather than make big step changes in how play is to make it safer. But I think they're failing in this one at all. a lot. So there you go. It's a players who contravene. Well, the Nocturnal Rights says players who contravene law 15.3 and win the ball are praised to the hilt. I don't know what law 15.3 is. I'll be honest. That's not within my. I can't remember know that off the top of my head. So Nocturnal Rights. I'm sure you're right. But yeah, the basic not supporting body weight is probably the big one there.
That's the ball. I was going to say that's really impressive from Nocturnal to quote law 15.3. Maybe he's using the law book as a pillow and sleeping with it.
So anyway, that's the start of our of the internationals for the weekend, and boy, it does get it does get a lot more complicated after this weekend. So obviously we have in this current weekend we have the Tier 1 nations. So Italy playing Samoa, Scotland, Fiji, Wales, New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa, or Ireland Springboks, France versus Australia, as you say, a tough outing next for Australia, and England versus Argentina. Amongst the sort of key Tier 2 nations, Georgia are playing Uruguay, and we also there's one. Spain are hosting Tonga there. Interesting that Japan does not have a game this coming weekend, who are obviously in the rugby at the Rugby World Cup. And then a few other kind of more obscure ones. Cross Keys playing Poland on the second, followed by Cardiff Met University playing Poland. So Poland having to back up just 2 days later for 2 games there. Romania playing Chile. We've also got Ireland A versus the All Blacks 15 as well. So, and Georgia versus. I mentioned Georgia. Right. Oh yeah, Namibia are also playing the Griquas as well. So lots and lots of rugby this weekend. We will bring you the results next weekend. Obviously, we will not talk in depth or even give you hot takes about every single game. But yes, they shed a load of rugby, and I'm sure nobody will be able to watch it all.
I was going to say, Paul, I was going to say, what game are you looking forward to the most of the weekend?
Oh, Cross Keys versus Poland, clearly.
Oh, you good idea. I was going to say, whilst here in New Zealand, we'll have a great interest in the Wales All Black game. I'll tell you what, that Ireland South Africa game, that'll be worth. I reckon that'll be worth staying up for. That'll be worth a look, and that kicks off around about 6:30 a.m. Sunday New Zealand time. So definitely worth a look.
You're a better man than I am if you're going to stay up till 6:30. I might get up early to watch that game. I'm not going to stay up till 6:30 to watch that game.
Well, I was thinking if you're getting up at 4:15 to watch the All Black Wales game.
I see it now. But yes, you're right.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Yeah, you got to say Ireland versus South Africa is the key clash of the weekend.
I was going to say you could fill time by watching Romania and Chile until the kickoff of the Ireland and South Africa game, if that rocks your world.
Absolutely. Simon does points out that yes, we do have the Rugby World Cup 2023 Rugby World Cup qualifying games on as well. So this weekend, the United States will be taking on Kenya, and Portugal will be taking on Hong Kong. Out of those, apparently Portugal are coming into this one as favourites, but I would have thought the USA would have been favourites in this one, having been at Rugby World Cups recently and having more exposure to Tier 1 rugby than Portugal gets.
There is a game that intrigues me, is Spain v Tonga. Of course, we can all recall the Spain national team playing a sort of like past All Black team, and quite an entertaining game when that took place several months ago, if I recall, if my memory's not too rusty. So it'll be interesting to see where their development against still a Tier 2 nation of Tonga, but Tonga will no doubt field some very, very good players. So it'll just be interesting to see their development. I'll tell you what, there's a lot to get your teeth into.
There is a lot to get your teeth into, and we will clearly keep up to speed with the qualifying tournament for the World Cup over the next 3 weeks, folks, because as I say, it kicks off with USA, Kenya, Portugal, Hong Kong, then Portugal, Kenya, USA Hong Kong is round 2 before what looks like being the decider, the USA versus Portugal, after Hong Kong versus Kenya in that final round. So yeah, looking perhaps I'm being unfair on Hong Kong and Kenya, but as I say, USA has had a lot more exposure to Tier 1 rugby, and Portugal gets to play teams like Romania, Georgia, Spain, and those sort of teams on a more regular basis. So they have a better competition to get themselves ready for this than somebody like Hong Kong and Fiji. To be honest,
it's interesting, Paul.
Jeez.
It's interesting, Paul, talking about the USA. We were talking about a little bit today. I sort of posted a number of about 30 odd players, and a good number of them they're heading across to the MLR for the upcoming season. And I do wonder if this influx of foreign players is having more of a negative effect on USA rugby than it is a positive effect.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there. But to me, it gives the American players a better, actually a competition to play in. I mean, it's only 3 years ago now, I think it is, maybe 4, that the USA had their first ever full squad of professional players or full-time players. Before that, they always had semi-amateur or amateur players included in their squad. So MLR should be doing should be good for the USA from that point of view. And by having foreign players, that should up the quality of MLR. So to me, when you've got a competition that's got 11, 12 sort of teams in it, I think it's that kind of many. If you're talking something more like the Super Rugby, or like 4 or 5 teams, I can understand where you're coming from. But when you've got that many teams, I think you're going to need those foreign players to get the quality up. Rather than, I don't think at the moment it's blocking players or American players from getting game time. I wouldn't have thought. I could be wrong, but that's my feeling on that one. But I mean, I know you have been talking in our live chat, and so has Boa in our private chat about the number of players heading overseas to Major League Rugby. I mean, Josh Symes from Hawke's Bay is heading over there to Old Glory. And how do you think it's going to leave Hawke's Bay? I mean, they lost their head coach last season to the Force. They've now lost who was an assistant coach, became head coach overseas. So 2 head coaches lost in 2 years. Is this going to be a problem for Hawke's Bay? And are they going to need to, or do you think they've got the coaching pipeline to survive this?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it says in the post that's on Twitter, that's the Old Glory club, that he's actually coaching for 2 years or 2 or 3 years over there, which probably means that I don't think he's going to have a lot of time. Usually that season finishes around about June. And I know there's a lot of players that are contracted to MLR who make their way back to New Zealand, and they'll probably filter into NPC squads if they're signed, or if they've got some sort of a arrangement. Just in terms of a coach that'll take over, I don't know if there's really anybody obvious at the moment. I know there was a fellow who came over from Clermont, ex Taranaki First Five, who was part of their coaching staff. And while we're chatting, I'll basically I'll Google him, but he's probably the number one contender to take over the squad. But I will say we've also got the likes of George Cornier, former Northern NPC coach, has moved back to the Hawke's Bay as well. But boy, wouldn't be a bad sort of side to cut your teeth with, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hawke's Bay have been heading in the right direction. As long as you can come in and continue that culture, I think you can go well. I mean, we've seen what happens with Bay of Plenty when they brought in I've gone blankers to the Super Rugby head coach who had been with the Waratahs, and he came in had a different defensive setup, didn't follow the same, didn't know the culture, and had an absolute failure of a season. Mike Delaney comes in, who is part of the setup, knows, has been there whilst Clayton was there. Thank you. Daryl Gibson was the coach. Thank you there, Simon. Mike Delaney comes in to replace Daryl, knows the culture, has the history within Bay of Plenty, and manages to go through and managed to get themselves, I think, was it semi-finals this year, up against Canterbury. So it depends on how you come in. Success takes time. So if you come in and continue what's being built, I think you're really going to be a good place in Hawke's Bay. If you come in and try and change things, I think you could flop really quite badly.
Now, the player I was about to mention is Australian player, actually, is Brock James. And back in 2004, he played 8 games for Taranaki, but most of his career has been spent in France, where he represented Clermont, Avogén, La Rochelle, Border Bagels, and La Rochelle. Excuse my French there, everybody. But obviously, most of his time spent in Europe, and he was on board as he's also had a bit of time at Ospreys as the attack coach, but also time at the Reds, Western Force. So he's actually been around. He's been around the traps, shall we say? There's plenty of experience there. But whether he's experienced enough to take over as the head coach at Hawke's Bay, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I'm saying, look, and if Josh was to come back from the US and try and coach NPC, we've seen what a struggle that is with our friend down in Southland. I've just I've gone blank. Had a great chat with him at the end of the season. Go on, Stephen. Remind me who I'm talking of.
I was gonna message you, mate. So everybody thought that it came to your mind. It's down
exactly. And who has been with the Moana Pacifica, but also doing Southland. And also doing, was it Tonga or Fiji? I can't remember. One of the Pacific teams.
Tonga.
Tonga, thank you, yes, that he was involved with. So, and he was like, look, it's too much. I can't do the NPC stuff as well. I'm going to probably have to step back from that. And we played the interview I had with him where he talked about that a few weeks back now. So, yeah, I think it would be a big ask for Josh to come back from, to try and juggle that. Whereas players, I can see going over and playing in the Major League Rugby, coming back and playing NPC on that one. Simon asks, he doesn't see why is it a major issue for it? Well, basically, the thing about NPC head coaching is that, yes, you do have your Super Rugby players and your Major League Rugby players, but they're the sprinkling on top. And where you really make the difference is that depth. By working with the coach, with your club players during the club season, and working with the club coaches to upskill and improve the level of your club competition, and your recruitment in that piece, and knowing your local players is absolutely key for an NPC coach. So if you're not there for the first 6 months of the season whilst all those players are playing, when you come back, you're in real trouble, and that's why I don't think you can do both at the same time. Is because there's quite a lot of work in that off season with your club players and your clubs.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. A lot of planning goes in, even as an NPC coach, and it's really important that the coach is there from the at least the beginning of the season, because you've signed. You want to be around to make sure that you're getting all your signings correct. Usually, most NPC coaches will sign a majority of their squad after the player reviews have been done, but they will leave the door open for anybody that might be running around or at club level, or basically get a pinpoint areas that they need to fill, and it may need that they go to market. So that's really important that the coach wants those particular players to fill the gaps around. And the other sort of issue is just in and around a lot of those players that are heading away to MLR. And listen, I'll be first to say good luck to them, because if you go to MLR, you can earn anything up to 13K to 45K, especially if you're a top end player going to the MLR. Now we're talking American dollars.
You're talking USD here, right? Not New Zealand.
We're talking US dollars here, but that just gives you a bit of an idea. An international can earn between 20 and 30,000. Probably somebody who's of NPC level can earn close to 20,000. We are talking US dollars, so you don't blame them for going. But the gap that it does leave, a lot of those guys would be injury cover for Super Rugby, or even they add such good value to their club competitions as well. So all of a sudden, you may not be playing against those quality NPC players around. And like I said, I came up with a list of about 35 odd players. I actually might post that list on our website, and let us know what you think. We're not begrudging those guys heading away to earn a bit of coin, but it's got to have a knock-on effect somewhere along the line.
Yeah, this is where some of the players, some of the names, Mitch Jacobson, for example, who's been in and about the Chiefs squad as part of the wider group there, and gets called in quite often. I mean, Luke Campbell also in there, Inga Finau from Hawke's Bay, Richard Judd from Wellington, a number of players in there who, as you say, not only will it does it hurt the club competition, so the traditional pathway of players into professional rugby in New Zealand. Now it's getting less and less as academies take hold, but still, it's still important. If you think about players, late blooming players like Kurt Eklund, etc., have come through because they've got the years of experience through club rugby, and they managed to grow into being Super Rugby players. And a lot of people are questioning why he's not with the All Blacks 15 on tour this month, for example. So those kind of players are going to find it harder to come through because the club competition is going to drop off and not be as strong for these for these kind of things. And also, as you say, that depth, that wider squad of players for Super Rugby aren't going to be there as well, and therefore that's going to impact the quality of Super Rugby in that one. Christopher has just joined us on. Hi there, Christopher. I guess you missed the men's and women's internationals. No, just the men's. We haven't talked about women's internationals yet at this point. Before we do get on to the men's side of the women's side of things, we should talk about we talked earlier about the impact that Scotland were missing some players from their game, and the Wallabies have got some injuries, but the All Blacks now are starting to basically have a lot of players missing. When Sam Cane has gone, Sam Whitelock will be captaining now with Bowden Barrett and Arlie Surveyor as vice captains for the rest of the tour. When you think we've already missing players like Goodhue, you've got Brady Retallick probably missing 3 games, I think it is, through his ban, or that's kind of what they're expecting him to get banned for his red card. It's been a while since the All Blacks have had to deal with quite so many missing players and injuries. Sure, there's been issues around midfield with both Goodhue and Anton Brown missing on regular times, but the rest of the squad generally has been there. A bit of a it's going to be a good test for the depth of the All Blacks, isn't it, Stephen?
Oh, absolutely, no question whatsoever. Because you've also got to take into account there's the likes of Quinta Paya who's out with a long-term injury at the moment. Josh Lord is obviously still on that injury list as well. Losing Sam Cane, there'd probably be a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, well, no, here's an opportunity to play Artie or Artie on the open side and try another number 8." But like I say, these guys, it's really experience. And I suppose if you could be critical of the All Black coach, well, the likes of Foster during his time is just the chopping and changing, and that's when he had guys on deck, if you know what I mean. All of a sudden, he's actually got guys. He's got genuine injury crisis, and he's just going to have to put some guys out there. But on saying that, hey, it's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, and because he has alternated so often, he doesn't know. All these guys now got a little bit of international experience that he's bringing anyway, so it's not as bad. And so in some ways you could say he's built depth by doing that, as the counter argument. I'm not sure I fully agree with that, but I just throw that out there as a counter argument on that one. So it's going to be interesting to see what sides we again. I guess also we should probably talk about just briefly something that came out in the media that Schmidt decided that he didn't want to play, or he didn't want to coach with Robinson, because he already said he would coach with Foster, and he felt that was a bit and to be asked to interview or to chat with Razor whilst there was already a guy in situ, he felt was he was being asked. He felt it was kind of morally wrong to be doing that. And hence he said, "Look, I don't want to. I've said I will coach with someone, so I want to back him a bit there." So it sounds like Schmidt was the kingmaker in the end as to who was going to be their head coach heading into the World Cup.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. But I suppose he just didn't want to, because if you I think he initially didn't want a part of this role, and all of a sudden he was given that opportunity. And listen, maybe he's hit it off with Ian Foster, because from what I've heard, the players, Foster's pretty well liked regardless of what everybody else thinks about the guy. So all of a sudden, seeming like, well, you know what, I'm gonna have to leave you, but I'm going to jump the ship and go and work with the other guy. Maybe at the end of the day, we should basically complement his values.
I compliment his values, and also, again, another question mark for New Zealand Rugby management board, who put him in this situation. I mean, geez, guys, you're a mess, and we'll and yeah, another question mark over them. Obviously. Actually, we probably should talk about last weekend, the clash between the All Blacks and the Black Ferns games as well. Look, I'm a great believer in the saying of if you can explain something through incompetence rather than conspiracy, incompetence normally wins out. And this, to me, was, again, this was incompetence by New Zealand Rugby, not disrespect, which was being thrown around on Twitter. Was it a clever thing to do? No, it wasn't. But it was down to incompetence, not down to disrespect for the women's game that it happened. So, is my view on that one.
I must admit, Paul, I actually changed my stance within the space of a few days, simply because I actually thought to myself, after originally thinking, "Wow, hang on, this is a mountain out of a molehill. It's on two different platforms. One game starts 40 minutes before the other one. You can basically have the best of both worlds if you can basically stream both of them at the same time." But not everybody's fortunate to do that. But I suppose at the end of the day, it was all about focus. If you think about when the All Blacks are actually, beg your pardon, playing a home test, they will basically they will shuffle the NPC around and basically have an extra game on a Friday. They'll probably play it at 5 o'clock, 5:30, have your 7 o'clock game. And that's to basically make sure all rugby is pretty much done by about 6 o'clock on a Saturday night. So the full focus is on the All Blacks. So they've actually done it before. And I know there was a bit of word that, listen, this schedule was put together by the Japanese rugby union, but for crying out loud, you're hosting a World Cup, at the end of the day. And whilst it's probably, there's still an old school out there who would probably argue that, oh, listen, they'll go out and put 50-odd points on Wales because they've done it before type thing. Why is it worth watching? It's really all about a support mechanism. And the next thing that maybe made me trigger my mind, and you mentioned before all the mistakes that the New Zealand Rugby Football Union has made. The one shining light with all the mistakes that they've made is actually the growth of women's rugby in New Zealand, which is actually propping the game up in a lot of cases, Paul, in terms of numbers, that is. So why wouldn't you basically, to use the Māori word, manaki, or look after that level of the game and give it everything you got and make it even bigger and better? And
yeah, look, I get around the Farah Palmer Cup games. I've got around the Super Rugby Aupaki games, and look, talking to I don't claim to be an expert on the women's game, folks, but I do get to talk to some people who are part of that game. I do think they think that there's that it's the foundations of the game, the number of club players, number of clubs that have good teams, isn't as strong as is being is advertised sometimes, and more work is still needed there. So yes, it's heading in the right direction, but I don't think it's heading as quickly as some people would like you to think it is. It is heading there, but but you're quite to me, this comes down to incompetence. This comes down to basically the All Blacks organisers and the Black Ferns organisers just not talking to each other at New Zealand Rugby HQ, and therefore this kind of thing happens. Yes, Japan, it's their home test, they get to organise when the game is, but it's outside of the international window, so you get to negotiate with them and set the terms of, look, we will come, but we need to be paid X amount, is what the discussion was. But you can also say, we'll come, but it has to be on Friday, and therefore we'll take 100 or 200k less. Now, people will say, oh, look, they need all the money they can get. Well, do they? Because they've just gone out and got Silver Lake when PricewaterhouseCoopers said they don't need the money yet. So so it's a matter of long-term growth compared to, or as you say, focus and nurturing something as opposed to short-term gain. And I say, and to me, it's just incompetence as opposed to an actual conspiracy, folks.
We could have a whole show of and talk about some of the mistakes the rugby union have made, and I'm not even talking about a decade of mistakes. I'm probably talking pretty much pre-COVID. You know, if you wanted to throw in another one, listen, the announcement of the Super Rugby teams. Listen, there was very little fanfare. There were just media releases here and there. You just want to give a competition like that a little bit of oomph, even if you ran some sort of competition for your supporters out there about who they think who the full blue squad's going to be, or who all the 5 squads are going to be, who's going to be your bolter, and just absolutely create a bit of interest. But there was just absolutely nothing. But I digress, because we are talking the women's game at the minute.
Sure, yeah, but let's go back to that one for a second, because again, you look at what the NBA does with their draft today, or draft weekend, or the NFL does their draft weekend, or you look at what the Tour de France has done with its announcement of the route for next year. You make a media event of it. Now, I'm not saying they have to have a draft, but you can make a media event of it and invite all the new caps or the new signed players up on stage and have a quick chat with them, etc. So you could definitely make that into much more of a media event. But let's go back to the women's game and run through the games from the weekend. Look, I think what we've seen here this weekend with the results is I think we could have picked these results all well before the weekend. France beating Italy 39-3, New Zealand beating Wales 55-3, England beating Australia 41-5. I think all those were pretty foregone conclusions and show you the level that those 3 teams are above the rest of the world at the moment. Canada beat the USA 32-11. Now, I heard some people saying this was going to be the only competitive game from this one, but if you think that Canada beat the USA 29-14 in the pool stages, and then also earlier this year beat the USA 36-5 as part of the Pacific 4 series, you could see that Canada were going to be the 4th team that would go through. So the 4 teams that we expected to go through previous weekend did, and that means we've now got semi-finals of Canada versus England and New Zealand versus France. So on that one, you've got to say England will beat Canada. Will be going through to the final as was expected pre-tournament. You've got to take your hat off to the Canadian women's team, who has done fantastically well to get to this stage comfortably, considering that they had to throw out their coaches because of the way the coaches were treating the women was wrong, put bluntly, and they got fired for it. And the union doesn't have the strength that the New Zealand Rugby Union is. They can't ship in a Wayne Smith and a Dan Carter and a and a Mike Cron and a few others to give them whatever you call it, that kind of support. So the Canadian women have done fantastically well to get to this point. There will be a third place playoff as well. That will be as before the final itself. So it's a double header for the final on the weekend as well. So all these 4 teams do have 2 more weekends to go.
Yeah, the only real gauge we've sort of got with Canada is in round 2 they beat Italy by 22 points to 10. Very hard to get a handle over their victory over Japan, and of course 2 similar marginal victories over the USA. I would probably suggest that have to be probably at least sort of 20 to 30% better to be competitive with what was a very good England performance against Australia on Sunday. I mean to say the heavens opened in Auckland on Sunday, especially over Waitakere Stadium. You needed a raincoat, another raincoat, and probably 2 umbrellas. That's how wet it was at Waitakere Stadium, and the English girls must have had big smiles on their faces when they saw the conditions. But on saying that, it was a pretty impressive performance with a lot of control. Zoe Harrison just playing the game the right parts of the field. Although credit to Australia, they did score one very, very good try, which was probably the try of the game. But I don't think the conditions probably did them any favour. And once again, Canada just basically, absolutely wore the USA down, similar to what they've done in the first game.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting then. The semi-finals. Canada, I say, well, England are favourites, clear favourites in that one. New Zealand, France. That is that is a tasty one. Clearly, last year France got I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 good victories over the 2 good victories over the Black Ferns, 38-13 and 29-7. This year, obviously, the Black Ferns much improved on that, and it's going to be interesting to see how much improved they are since that disastrous November tour that they had over to Europe. I think it is a different team, and we've seen different captains and various players have been moved on. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go. But this to me is going to be a cracking game.
Oh, listen, I think the thing that they've got going on their side, Paul, I think that togetherness, and I think they've got the country behind them as well, and I think they've realised that. And whilst in their first 2 games they had a few issues with their scrum when they've switched off, you can just see it's actually got much better again, and even a couple of early penalties that they gave away against Wales, whilst they were technical penalties, you could pretty much tell that they had the wood on Wales at scrum time. They'd gone away and did their work. But I suppose for everybody, what we don't know, thinking back to the Women's Six Nations and that was played in Europe, England was still a 40-50 point better side than what Wales were back in that particular competition. It's probably one of the reasons I was a little bit disappointed with Italy, to be honest, Paul, because I think they actually may have actually upset France in the Women's Six Nations this year, or maybe went down by a couple of points to France. If I recall, I stand to be corrected there earlier in the season, so I kind of expected a little bit better from them. But with regards to the Black Ferns, yeah, you can definitely see improvements in their game, but boy, against this French team has got a very, very good pack, and in their halfback, Pauline Bourdon, she runs the game pretty well. Also, I think their fullback as well, and her name just escapes me at the minute. Paul, very good player as well. She won't run back as much, but she will basically kick for position. Quite happy. She'll be quite happy for the French to go to another set piece, shall we say.
Yeah, it's good. So France, just to corrections corner, France beat Italy 39-6 in the Six Nations, but they had 2 warm-up games ahead of this tournament where France beat Italy 21-0, but then Italy beat France 26-19 in the return fixture. So I think there might have been obviously some rotation in that as France were dealing with their squad, but even so, to bounce back from that. But I think if you think France beats Wales 5-33, so away from home against Wales, beat Wales by 33 points to 5, gives you an idea that yes, the Black Ferns beat Wales 55-3. Okay, yes, they put 20 extra points on, but I say it's lining up to be a cracking game between those two, and that to me is perhaps game of the weekend ahead of Ireland versus Springboks even.
I agree.
7 p.m. on Saturday night, guys.
Sorry to interrupt, Paul. It definitely has the potential to be the game of the tournament. I think if here's a chance for Auckland to actually get in behind this Black Ferns. Full credit to Whangarei. They 2 weekends in a row, 16,000 turned out for the first game, and officially 18,500 turned out for the second game, and the grandstand looked way fuller than it was in the first game. So listen, there was a lot of talk pre-tournament about the games being played in this northern region area, but you've got to give big ups to the people of Northern for turning out, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the Women's Rugby World Cup generally is played on sort of two venues or even one venue historically, and it is growing to be able to move to more places. They were going to spread it around a bit more around New Zealand, apart from COVID. Then said, look, from a COVID point of view, it's more sensible to keep it in a contained area, which is what they ended up with. But it's good to look. This is a tournament that previously would be played, on two pitches at the same place. So it's good to see that it's slowly growing, and it's growing in a sustained way rather than trying to make it a 50 team tournament overnight or anything silly like that. Final point, I guess, is the Wallaroos coach after their exit said, look, there needs to be a domestic overhaul. They said they need to play more domestic rugby, and there needs to be an investment to allow that to happen. They've had Super W for more years than Super Rugby Aupaki has been around for, but it's still amateur players, and it's still, I think it's one game, or I will check that to make sure I'm not getting it wrong. But he says he tries to search for the Super W, which I know I have somewhere in my. There it is in my. Super W this year was 5 rounds plus the playoffs. So clearly home and away, getting it up to with 6 teams there because they have the Fiji and Drua are also involved. Getting that home and away up to 10 rounds is kind of what they need to do if they're going to start competing with teams like England, who have got the Premier 15s, which is I'm trying to find. I think that's a 12-team competition, except Wasps have, and I think maybe also perhaps lost a couple of teams due to financial issues over there. But still, a 22-game season as opposed to a 5-game season, your players are going to be much more ready to play at the international level, and so it needs to be. That does need to grow as well. He's quite right, and you can't grow that kind of thing. You can't expect people to take 2 or 3 months off work without paying them, because essentially you've got to pay your bills. You have to put a roof over your head. Yeah. Making it a month you take off is more manageable.
I was about to say, Paul, the other issue that Australian rugby has is the NRL now have a women's competition, and you're finding that a lot of some girls that have been involved with the Australian Sevens program are actually playing in that women's NRL competition. So sometimes they're not always getting the best athletes coming across the rugby. So similar problem they have in the men's game.
And also you've got the women's AFL as well, which is also growing well, from my understanding over there. But also Super Rugby Aupaki, again, it needs to be more games. 3 rounds of games plus the semi-finals and the final isn't going to prepare you to play England. Right? What we've seen this year is you've locked up 30-odd players for the year, made them full time, and that's produced a competitive Black Ferns team. The problem is you can't do that every year because you've got to feed into that squad, and where those players are going to come from. They need to have a solid competition to get game time in as well. So both what I've said about Super W applies to Rugby Aupaki, in my opinion, as well. I've cut off everything I thought we were going to talk about, Stephen. Any other final passing shot?
Yeah, there's just one more thing I wanted to add to the list this week in Auckland. The New Zealand Provincial Rugby executives have got together in Auckland just to thrash out some foreseen issues that they see in the game moving forward. Now, to anybody watching who doesn't follow the Bunnings NPC in New Zealand this year, it actually went back to a one-team competition, admittedly with two split sides of the draw, but it seemed like at least it was a competition where whether 1 through 14 could win the Bunnings NPC. But at the moment, the balance of the competitive nature or the balance of the competition is actually being questioned. Apparently, leading provinces are spending up to 1.8 million a year on their playing squads, while the bottom teams have a player budget between 800 and 900,000. So a potential salary cap of 1.2 million is not going down too well with those unions that are obviously spending a little bit more than that. So they obviously haven't.
Auckland, Canterbury.
Yeah. Which guys? Sorry, quietly. Yeah, with a little bit of a cough, he says. So it's meant provinces like Southland would still get to play crossover games against these bigger unions, but to be part of a competition that's basically resourced at a fair level. And we probably didn't see it. We thought we'd see a lot more of it. At the first round, after the first round, we saw some big blowouts, but sort of in reality, they only ended up really being probably the Turbos, I think, who went through the whole season without winning, but there might be more underlying issues with that particular union than just in around a salary cap. Ironically, they're a team that's probably lost the most players to the MRL this year, so there's a bit for the CEOs to thrash out. So hopefully this time next week, Paul, we may have a few unanswered questions to go over in and around those meetings that are taking place.
I would love to get some answers, but hey, that would involve transparency, which wow. So actually, well, what we will do though, okay, and I've been planning to do this for a while. I will reach out to the to the CEOs of provinces that we know about, that we get on with, and see if I can line up some interviews next week after this has all happened. So we'll look into that. But Christopher Edwards Bailey, who says, look, 120k for a team of 30, $4,000 a season, mate, you're living in La La Land, mate. That just is not doable. You can't expect a player to give up 12 weeks, 3 months for $4,000. You can't put a roof over your head for $4,000 for basically, well, you need 3 weeks or 3 months of the season. Then you add in another month of preseason, and then you've got to be part-time for the rest of the year to be able to get it to that level. You can't expect players to play for $4,000 for $1,000 a month. That's not even minimum wage, mate. So there's no way that's anywhere near. He's talking about Premier 15s. Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I thought you were talking about NPC. So yes, so that's
pounds.
Some pounds. Yes, I did see the pound sign. Sorry, mate. Sorry, Chris. My bad. You're talking about the Premier 15s over in the UK, over in England. Sorry. So I think he's stick with the current format for the NPC. I think there's one tweak that it needs. It needs to be 1 week longer and get rid of the storm weeks because it impacts some teams way heavier than others. It's too much a lottery as to how many injuries you've got, and also how many, and also which teams you happen to pull. If you pull 3 of the top teams in those 3 weeks, then you're in those 3 games. Sorry, in Storm Week. Then you're in real trouble. But if your middle game happens to be against Manawatu 2 Turbos, then it's not much of an issue. And that lottery and that difference between different teams, it just makes it unfair. So I think you do need to just add an extra week, and it will all be good on that.
It's quite interesting, Paul, that in Heartland Rugby, they're quite happy to let lone players come out of excuse me, some of the bigger units. I think they call them heritage players. So it and in some cases, I've heard a few complaints about it where some of the unions have basically gone a little bit, sort of stretched it out a bit and got 2 or 3 players playing from one of the bigger regions, and that's had a huge difference. So I can't see why maybe something similar can be done for the NPC. Once again, you'll run into that argument from the bigger unions saying, hey, we develop these players, but we also know that these bigger unions have a backlog of players stuck in their academies and their development squads who could probably, once again, if you've got enough talent out there, spread the love.
Now, one thing that Simon mentions is there that Sky have spent all their money on securing the Rugby World Cup, or with World Rugby for the next however many years. Yeah, they gave World Rugby Rugby Pass, which they bought a few years ago. So a whole bunch of issues or a bunch of stuff to discuss in there that perhaps we'll leave to the off season. Should your union or should the administrators also trying to be a media organisation at the same time? Is that a good idea or not? We saw that worked really, really well with Rugby Network over in the USA, for example. And Steve was wagging his finger. I thought he was going to say something, but he's not in the end in that one, which helped to bankrupt the USA Rugby, by the way, if you're wondering why I'm talking about that. So, so the Rugby Network over in the USA, managed to put them in the hole for 5 million or whatever it was. I can't remember the exact number, folks, but it was a chunk of change on that one. Cool. Thank you, Stephen. Great to chat to you again. Folks, we're trying to get back into the routine of being here on a Tuesday night at 8 p.m. So catch you all next Tuesday, and obviously we've got that plethora of international men's action, plus that mouth-watering clash between the Black Ferns and France in the Women's Rugby World Cup to look forward to for us to discuss next week here next week on Tuesday at 8 p.m.
And I will be on time.
Wow, really? On
yes.
time? Wow, maybe you'll be on time and like a couple of minutes early, just so we can check your technical sound and do a sound check. So thank you, everybody. It's been a blast. Catch you all next week.